And if you take this opportunity as a way to help others defend and keep their territories, their cultural and natural resources, you become much more engaged in working for the cause. This is the case of our keynote speaker today. He was born and raised in the Cofán village of Durango, an indigenous group in the Ecuadorian Amazon. He grew up living as any young Cofán does. For many years, this community has struggled to keep their habitat, territory, and way of living. To that end, he co-founded Fundación Sobrevivencia Cofán in 1999, after years of fending off oil companies, organizing to obtain land titles for the Cofán, starting a Cofán community ecotourism project, and creating and expanding community conservation projects. Due to his great work, he has been featured in many major magazines and TV shows around the world. Additionally, he has also been recognized for conservation awards: the Parker Gentry Award for Conservation Biology, the World Wildlife Fund Conservation Area Award, and the Friends of the UN 50th Anniversary Award in Forestry and Renewable Resources. A man committed to the cause, fighting for a community that can be called his own. He is considered by the Cofán to be one of the most important and respected leaders. It is a pleasure and an honor to introduce Randy Borman.
Hey everybody, it's a great honor to be here, and a great pleasure to be able to do one of these things here in Ecuador. It's really nice to be in my home. I'm going to start out with, can you have the lights?
Yeah, we're working.
I think everybody can see it even with the lights on. But I titled this the Cofán Survival Project. I want to, before I talk about the Cofáns and about my own experience, I want to isolate that word survival. And what this is not about the Cofáns being able to survive. This is about everybody being able to survive, and this is what the Cofáns are doing about trying to make it possible for everybody to survive. So the Cofán Survival Project is not talking about the Cofán survival only. It's talking about the Cofán's response to everybody's survival on the entire planet. Okay? So starting with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Cofáns, who the Cofáns are. First of all, let's locate them in place. For those of you who don't know Ecuador, the northeastern section, Quito, is, let's see if we can find this. I don't know. Anyhow, Quito is right kind of in the middle of it. But at any rate, the driving out of Quito about 3 hours from here, you begin to get down into the rainforest, and you begin to drive alongside the Cayambe National Park, the Cayambe Coca National Park. And once you're in that section, you're in Cofán ancestral territories. The whole northeastern corner of Ecuador was the homeland of the Cofán people, traditionally. When the Spanish arrived in the New World, the Cofáns probably numbered about 20,000 people, and were living in between the montane forests right up alongside the Andes, all the way out into the tropical areas where they began to share their space with the Siona Sequoia peoples, who then extended down across the border into Peru. At the moment, there are about 11 communities of Cofáns here in Ecuador, and if you look at the green spots, those are territories, Cofán territories, that are actually under control of the Cofáns. the northern area. They were part of a coalition. Okay. That tried to defend the northern area against the Incas during the invasion, the Inca invasion in the late 1400s. And they were defeated by the Incas. They returned to the Oriente, to the jungle area, and were living there when the Spanish then began their activities in the 1530s in the area. And through the years, they were considered a warlike group that was able to defend themselves very well. Missionaries first arrived, Catholic missionaries first arrived in the area in the 1580s, had mixed results. And by the 1600s, the Copans were still very much in possession of their territories, but then began something that the Copans share with many of the other Amazonian groups, tremendous loss of life due to diseases. From 20,000, possibly more than that were actually Copan speakers, the population was reduced by the 1900s to less than 400 people. That's how close the Copans came to a total extinction. Many Amazonian groups disappeared completely. The most vulnerable were the people who were living right alongside the rivers, on the big rivers, and had commerce with lots of other indigenous groups throughout the Amazonia and up into the mountains and actually over to the coast. We've been doing work recently on trying to retrace some of the old trails that actually led up into the mountains and then went over the Andes and down to the coast. And the trade routes also went down into what's now central Peru, and at least a few traders made it down as far as the mouth of the Amazon and came back with the stories of seashells lying on the beach just for picking. Seashells were being used for beads, which was one of the currency things that everybody was using in those days. And people were very impressed that they got down there, and the other thing that they were very impressed with is that the river flowed backwards regularly. They got down into the tidal areas. So these were people who were traveling all over the place. But because of the travel, they were also very vulnerable to diseases. And as the European movement came into the New World, smallpox, measles, polio, tuberculosis, malaria, yellow fever, something that a lot of people don't even think about, as a old world disease. Move in, find means of travel and attack, especially the more organized groups that were trading, because they had this, you have a trader down in the village in Brazil when an epidemic moves in, and the trader says, hey, I'm getting out of here, and he pulls back a river as best he can, and contaminates all villages along the way, I suppose. So the population in Amazonia as a whole crashed during basically the 400 years subsequent to the Spanish arrival, Spanish and Portuguese arrival. And by 1930, we probably had only, less than 400 Copans. For sure, we were less than 400. My parents were missionaries. They came in 1954 as part of a huge missionary movement that gripped the post-World War II Western world. The missionaries were not just religious missionaries, they were cultural missionaries, they were political missionaries, all forms of missionaries that went out at this time. The Western world was very convinced they just wanted a huge war against what was considered tremendous tyranny, and had won it, and were very good because they had the answer to everything. And in my parents' case, they were part of a mission group whose goal was to actually go in and develop alphabets for languages that had never been written before, and then develop a literacy system for that. And then the religious component was to actually translate the Bible into the indigenous language. My parents worked for several years in just learning the language because there were no ways to easily do that. It was you're talking about a language that was not even related to the Western languages, and so something as simple as house, in Spanish, casa. Well, okay, the concept is basically the same. It's just two different words for the same thing. But when you go to Zao, the Kopan word, it has a whole different stream of connotations, a whole different idea behind it, a whole different philosophy of living behind it. And so you not only had to learn different words for the same things, but you also had to learn completely new cultural concepts. And of course, this is without books or anything like that, so it took me several years to learn. Meanwhile, that's me in my mom's arms there. I had a huge advantage of just being another one of the little kids there. So I started speaking Borman as my first language. That was I drove my parents nuts because I tried to answer them in Borman. They were talking English to me. And eventually I got it worked out, but they said it was until I was about 5 years old before I finally got my grammar straightened out between the two languages. People at the time when I came in, they were very, very, very colorful people. This was one of my best friends. He's 10 years older than me. He was my hero when I was growing up. So those are jaguar teeth that he's wearing around his neck. And then the masses of beads that were part of your status. That was how you determined your status in the world, and they were used for money and exchange and everything else. And then, of course, the crown came from, I actually counted how many birds went into one particular crown. It was over 80 birds that went into a single one of these big feathered crowns. It wasn't a problem. It was part of the way that the life was at that time. Women likewise dressed incredibly colorfully, all part of a culture, very, very small culture in a very, very, very large environment. One of the things that, as I was growing up, that was a concept that's very difficult now for people to really understand, was that we really, truly had unlimited resources. We were not bound any way by our use of our resources. The technology that we had and the population that we had was such that we could have destroyed, if we felt like it, this wasn't obviously something that people want to do, but we could have destroyed the maximum of our capabilities, our technological and populational capabilities. And by the time we got from one end of our territory to the other, several generations later, the original area that we had destroyed would have been returned to completely, totally, undecipherably normal rainforest once again, with all intact populations. That's what it means to have unlimited natural resources. We had probably about 5 million hectares that we were able to use. We had pristine rivers. The rivers would get muddy, really ugly muddy, but it wasn't a situation where we were going to have any problems with drinking water. Water was very, very clear. Likewise, our forests were very extensive, full of wild game. Along the river banks, we had extremely fertile soils that we were using to plant our plantain and yucca. Our houses were constructed from all materials from the jungle itself, leaves. The stairway up it, there was a big balsa log, and it was light enough to carry around and big enough that you could make the steps up. The transport was all via our rivers. we had a river network that we transported around on. One of the big complaints right now, we've got the Marines have moved in, the Marina has moved into controlled river traffic, right? And one of the things that they want us to do is everybody has to wear life preservers every time they're in a boat. During the last 100 years or so, as far as I know, no boats have drowned in the river. They were masters of the river. And as kids, we started, managing canoes not all that long after we started walking. It was, like 5 years old, you're already having around on the rivers and getting in trouble, of course. Our parents didn't like it, especially. I remember trying to dry out clothes after we had been swimming, that we weren't supposed to be swimming, and sitting around trying to dry out the clothes, trying to think of excuses why our hair was going to get wrong. Houses were very, very practical. Life was very, very practical, and just about everything that we had, everything that we needed was actually coming from the rainforest. I always liked this particular house. This was a house that I spent a lot of time in when I was a kid, because the old lady, the grandma, she was kind of grandma to everybody in the village, but she was very, very open, having little boys running around all over the place. But if you can look around at some of the things that are here, I don't know how easy it is for people to see things. You've got a fish net hanging here. You've got clay pots up here. This is the fire table. This is the fireplace where the cooking is done. Baskets holding various household goods and things like that. A small bundle here, which is actually the poison for the dark poison, that was being used for the blowgun. The blowgun was the primary hunting weapon. Secondary hunting weapon was the spear. Over here you see a big vaquilla, which was being used for putting meat in, that kind of, instead of having a big plastic tray, it was a stainless steel tray. It was made out of wood. A couple of aluminum kettles here, brand new aluminum kettles that had been picked up from someplace, that were a symptom of some of the change that was coming into the world. But basically, just about everything in the house, things made from materials from the jungle, and allowing people to live a very secure and solid life in the jungle. Lorenzo again making a hammock. And then some of the new technology combined with some of the older people. When I was growing up, the man standing here beside the radio was the chief of the village. He's a man named Guillermo, and he was a shaman, and he was also purported to be able to transform himself into a jaguar. What we did know in those early days was that we had jaguars all over the place, and it was one of my big frustrations when I was a little kid. I was always, everybody would get up in the morning and they'd say, "Wow, did you hear the jaguars roaring last night?" I'm afraid I missed it. I didn't hear it. So finally, I had one day that I heard the jaguar roaring, and I said to everybody, "Hey, wow, I heard the jaguar last night." And I got laughed out loudly, and everybody said, "That was your dad snoring." So much for my jaguar. Eventually, my ears got tuned into it so that I could actually hear it. But he was reputed to be one of the people who had the power to actually change himself into a jaguar. So that was one of his calling cards as a shaman. He became a very, very close friend with my dad. I think they have a lot in common, and I think that one of the big reasons why my parents were invited to stay there at the Reno in the first place was because of Guillermo's understanding that he was going to be able to have a special relation with my dad. And they were very, very close friends. Here's the old lady that I was talking about. She's working on a bunch of darts and actually putting poison on the darts. You can see right over here in the foreground, you can see the dart holder with the K-Pot spilling out of the board and then a bundle of darts that she's actually putting some poison on and then setting them up by the fire to dry. And these were just typical scenes. This was the way life was when I was growing up. It was an incredible world. It was an incredible life. All of this changed in 1964. 1964, consortium of two oil companies, Texaco and Gulf, moved into the area with military-like precision. They just had this tremendous infrastructure and logistics and everything like that. And they poured in, opened up an airstrip at a place, an old Goban village site called Santa Cecilia, and proceeded to bring in tons of equipment, hundreds of people, and began to explore for oil. It was known that there was oil in the area because Shell Oil Company had been in there in the late 40s and had found oil, but then had lost their losses and pulled out. But this was a completely different world. Helicopters allowed people to mobilize in a way that they'd never been able to do before. And within a period of 2 years, the initial seismic testing had been done, and the first oil was discovered in 1966 at a place that's now the city of Laguayo. At that time, it was still Goban hunting grounds. It was a Goban village actually there called Alsacho. In 1967, I went in with another 3 Goban men, and we hiked into an oil well that was being drilled right beside the Reno. And this was the first experience of pollution that we had. We were all interested in going back in and just seeing what they were doing, and we heard that there was this white stuff, these small kernels that tasted really, really good, rice. And so we were going in to actually get a taste of this rice. So we were very, very excited about this whole thing. And so we hiked in, and we get near the oil well, and we're listening to the roar of the oil well and everything that's going on up there. And we look down the river and in the stream, and there's all these fish dying. And I was ecstatic. I was 12, I think, at the time. And I started, grabbing these fish and picking them up, and I was really, really excited about the whole thing. And the older guy, Hector, who is now my brother-in-law, he looks at me, picks one up, and he smells it. He says, this doesn't smell right. He says, we're not going to be able to eat this. Throw it back. Something's wrong with this. And sure enough, what it was that all the drilling mud was being dumped into the river, and this is what was actually killing them. Shortly thereafter, the oil was discovered at that well, and the rivers, all the streams and rivers below that were polluted by heavy runoffs of petroleum in the first thing. And through the years, there's been over 20 spills at that particular well. The production waters of 400 barrels of production waters per day continued to pour into the Aguaico River system through the Goban territory there until 1998. And right now they're in the process of reopening that well to try to continue exploitation of that well. Along with the oil company came the road system of the pipelines. And here is one of the pipe construction machines actually going in. And right at the same time, we lost, right in that same period of time, in the late 1960s, we also lost Guillermo Pacho, this Quintero from the San Miguel, another one of the chiefs, Gregorio, basically all of the leadership of the Goban Nation. The road arrived in 1972, and with the road came a massive colonization, massive movement of people from other parts of Ecuador, landless people, Some of the people especially from the southern province of Loja, were facing starvation because of a tremendous drought that was occurring down there, and they poured into what were considered by the government to be empty lands, the Copan territories that were considered to be empty lands. The Copans were left with no rights whatsoever. By 1974, Lago Agrio, where the first oil had been found, was a reality. And the Copans who lived there moved out of the area, and the whole thing began to change. The whole world that we had known was basically destroyed. Copans, in 1974, Copans were even kicked out of their own homes and out of their own fields by colonists who came with papers from the government land office saying that this land belonged to them. And said, you guys get out of the way. So we were talking about basically a weightless people. I began working on Copan land issues pretty much straight out of high school. I did a year at the University of the States and then came back, spent a year here, and then went back to the States again. I kind of followed that pattern through those early years. But the fight that we began at that time was to actually try to figure out how to survive in this modern day world, going back to that whole idea of survival. And as we did that, one of the things that we really began to analyze was what makes us Copans? What is the thing that allows us to be Copans? And what does it mean for us to survive? It's just physical survival. I mean, we could go and get jobs in the oil company and probably make a living and all of that. But what is it that is going to be able to preserve our culture as well? And when we started analyzing that, we realized that it was really our forest, our relationship with our forest, and our whole being with the forest. And that's when we began to really work on trying to recover land areas. In the 1970s, we were able to get a small land grant in my home village, and a group of us began an ecotourism project that we then moved down to an area much farther downriver. It was still pristine at that time, and established a new village called Samo. And over the subsequent years, we were able to get an ecotourism project going as a means of providing income for us, and also for allowing us to take off and continue to try to get land areas. One of the big things that we had to do was to try to figure out how to organize ourselves, get ourselves into a situation where we can actually begin to confront the outside world. We didn't have any Spanish speakers when we first started. I remember practicing speeches hours upon hours as I would travel in the boat, and trying out different combinations with my limited vocabulary and trying to figure out exactly what I was going to say. And as long as the government officials I was dealing with didn't step outside of what I'd already been talking about, it was fine. But the minute I stepped out of that, then it was difficult. And all of this led to confrontations with the oil company during the 1990s. Oil companies had gotten used to the idea that they didn't have to ask anybody. They could just go in and do whatever they wanted to do, whatever they wanted to do it. And we said, no, wait a minute. If you guys are going to come in here and try to do anything, we need to have some rules here. We need to have some regulations here. And there's things that we are not going to allow you to do, period. And so we began a fight in the early 1990s that attracted international attention, and were able to actually halt oil companies' entry into what is now the lower Bayaveno Reserve, the Samo area. And we were able to kick out most of the oil company activity around the immediate village of Carreno. And the Copans during this time have really established themselves as defenders defenders of the environment. Incredible environment. It's just some of the scenes from some of the different areas that we were actually controlling. We began to work to get more legal backing for our territories, and over the next, during the late 1990s and early 2000s, we were able to then recover approximately what is now 430,000 hectares of rainforest territories, ranging from high mountain stuff, ranging from high mountain territories to the headwaters of the Alwadico and Koga rivers, and San Miguel rivers, to the lowland tropical rainforest down in the Rio Grande area. As we were doing this, we were also working with tourism. And one of the first things that we began to realize as we worked with tourism is that it wasn't just us that was interested in these rainforests. There were a lot of other people all over the world who were also benefiting from these rainforests. And as we recognized that, as we began to realize that, our work to try to recover our territories for our lifestyle really was just a very, very small part of the picture. That really what we were doing was we were acting as the guardians, the custodians of something much, much, much bigger, something that was not just for our benefit, but was for the benefit of these people who were coming in as ecotourists and other people who were also coming in. And we began to try to analyze exactly what that meant. And over the years, as science has advanced, we've become more and more aware of the bad things that are happening as rainforests are cut down on a world level. I think we're all very aware of global warming, global climate change, CO2 emissions problems that we're facing as a globe, we're facing as a world, the tremendous environmental footprint that especially the Western world has produced as it's gone on and developed itself. We just did a little workshop here, and I was impressed with, most of us basically in the, well, it's nice that you're trying category rather than the, hey, you guys are really green category. I mean, unfortunately, that's the reality. The reality of the way that we live, the way that the Western world lives, is a world where we are having a tremendous environmental impact and far, far above what is something that is sustainable for the world. So when we started looking at our rainforests and our wild areas as something different than that, as something that was where we were not just the owners, but we were a bit more the custodians of this for the world. As we began to change our mentality as Bormans and began to try to become much more innovative in how we were going to approach protecting these areas. Our STAR program, as we developed, go back just a little bit, the Fundación Sobrevivencia Borman, we formalized what I have been doing at the community level, especially with the Sabo community, and we formalized it as a fundación, as an NGO in 1998, and began to actually work on projects as a fundación and to be able to handle funding from the outside world, from the foundation world, and from grants and different sources, from individual donations, whatever. We were able to then expand our operation tremendously via that. And one of the first things that we did, starting in 2001, was to begin the development of a system of protecting these rainforests. It's one thing to get a title, but even within the national park system, we were becoming very, very aware that the mining, the oil companies, the illegal optimization, very, very direct, just going in there and cutting it down for pastures and for coffee fields was something that was just happening on a daily basis. And so we developed the Park Guard program, the Borman Ranger program. We got a mandate from the Ecuadorian government that legalized these community park guards. And they are now in charge of actually maintaining and keeping those forests intact. We had to build infrastructure, and this is our office, and I said we'll find out that Apple, which is right up on the northern border with Colombia, right smack up against the border. And patrol groups that would actually go in and confront miners and loggers and whoever else was doing things. It's been an extremely successful program. It's been able to lower deforestation in Borman territories to basically zero deforestation over the past 10 years. Which is just an incredible figure in the modern day world. And in the process, the protection of biodiversity is just completely incredible. We've got some of the most biodiverse areas in the globe. It's just, when we're talking about biodiversity, we've got one patch that I always like to talk about. It's 500 hectares. 500 hectares of area in which we did a study of biological inventory, and I think it was 2002. We found 700 bird species. We found over 3,000 woody plants and trees. It's the world center of radiation. There's no other place in the world that has as many species of radiation. And this is just a 500-hectare plot. Of course, it's on the side of a mountain, so we had a huge altitudinal gradient. It was just really, really critical in that sense. But one of the projects that we've been doing for many, many years that I'll talk a little bit about is the rescue of the Amazon river turtle. We've been able to recover the population of those. Spectacled bear, of course, is an emblematic part of our high forest. And over here is a tapir, kind of walking away, but that's another one of the emblematic species that is part of what we're protecting as response. The whole story behind our protection, though, as we expand and get to modern day, is that this is not a protection that is isolated and directed only to Kofans. Going back to the first statement that I made when I started, Kofan's survival project is talking about Kofan's response to the survival of the globe. You folks who will come in on that carbon footprint questionnaire at the, keep on trying, and your intentions are good. The reason why we're still able to survive is because these rainforest areas are still there. My vision, as we've been working on this, as we've developed this whole thing, is that we begin to recognize, as a global community, the importance of these rainforests, first of all. Second of all, that we begin to recognize what we need to be supporting directly as we work in our daily lives, whatever our cultural level is, whatever our cultural thing is, and that we're able to actually go the next step and begin to link ourselves as a Western society, as an affluent group of people, that we can begin to link ourselves directly to places that are providing environmental services that are offsetting our lifestyles, and begin to protect those before it's too late. challenges that I've had just in the last couple of years. I've been working to try to figure out, working with, of all people, insurance companies, to try to figure out if we can begin to put a monetary value in some form or other on intact rainforests, intact habitats. At the point where we can begin to put monetary value in insurance terms. Okay, if these millions of hectares had not been forested, what would have been the cost of a natural event, of a hurricane or a snowstorm or whatever? What would have been the cost if these areas hadn't been there? We already know that there's a cost associated with what we've already done in damaging our ecosystems in our world, with our emissions of our carbon, with our deforestation, with all the rest. We already know that there is a correlation between this. Okay, what's the correlation if we keep on going with this? What are we talking about? This is where our co-bond response to this is to say, okay, we have 430,000 hectares of forest. We are offering this to the world, and we need support from a real-life community, a virtual community that could be linked by internet, by email, by the web. Well, what we need now is to have this interaction where we are being supported, and we are supporting a finite group of people who are dedicated to that particular spot. If we can pull this off, if we can make this happen in our section, there's lots of other sections out there. All of the things that I've been talking about in Borman also apply to our neighbors in Sequoias, also apply to our neighbors in Huitotos, also apply to our neighbors, the Sábados, just a little bit farther south of us. All of these other groups that are out there that are also right in the same position where they are custodians of large areas of territory, but right now the pressures that are coming on them are tremendous. As we look at the culture today, many of the things, because we are able to keep that forest, many of the things are the same, but some of the things are different. Right here, the education systems, one of our projects that we've had for a long time is to actually educate people who are going to be the future leaders of the co-funds. And this is a process that is, everybody here knows what that's about, but trying to figure out how to do this. And as I wind up here, the things that we are aiming for as we go into this co-fund survival project for the world, is to really develop the sense on a global level of the importance of these rainforests and try to develop a means where individuals can become part of an individual setting, individual situation. I think this is the answer. I don't think that, when you send off a donation to an entity that, a huge global entity that, you don't know whether that's going to be applied to telephone calls in Washington, D.C., or whether it's going to be applied to Social Security for somebody or whatever, you have no idea. But now, because we do have the instruments that are available via the internet and via this whole different way of looking at things, we are able to then go and actually make these things and make these connections on an individual level, on a level where you can become a partner with us in a very, very direct way, and where you, as an individual, can say, okay, yeah, sure, I generate this much carbon footprint, my environmental footprint is this, but my environmental footprint is being taken care of because I'm part of the Kovan survival project. I'm part of the group that is actually has this particular forest that is being set aside. We have a nominal number that's 5,000 people for this. 5,000 people, each donating $10 a month, sort of thing, that is going to be able to pull this off. It's it's kind of a nominal idea, and it's a vision rather than something that we can actually pinpoint it down. If we can do this, if we can pull this off, then we can apply the same formula to other areas and begin to increase this network of rainforests that will remain intact, cultures that will be able to remain intact into the future, not only for their own benefit, but for the benefit of the entire world and for all of you who are here. And I think that's where I'm going to stop. So thank you very much.